She was bloodied, gasping, and cornered by two men who didn't care about her title or her wealth. A CEO no one recognized, trapped in a dark alley with nowhere to run. He was just a single dad walking home from a late shift, carrying groceries for his daughter's breakfast, until he heard the sound that changed everything. A scream cut short. What he did next, the way he stepped into that alley, the tattoo they saw on his arm that made two grown men flee like shadows. It stopped the attack. But what came after? The secret she carried, the life she was running from, and the love neither of them saw coming. That will stay with you long after the final word. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The rain had been falling for hours, not the kind that washes things clean, but the heavy, relentless kind that soaks through jackets and turns streets into mirrors, reflecting neon signs and distant headlights. The small Oregon town of Hollow Creek had long since tucked itself in for the night. Storefronts were dark. Traffic lights blinked yellow at empty intersections. Most people were home, wrapped in the warmth of Friday evening routines. But not Jackson Sullivan. At 37, Jackson had learned that life didn't wait for convenient hours. He walked alone down Birch Street, a canvas grocery bag slung over one shoulder, his other hand shoved deep into the pocket of his worn jacket. His boots splashed through puddles he didn't bother avoiding anymore. The late shift at the packaging warehouse had run long tonight, equipment malfunction, and now it was nearly midnight. Inside the bag were eggs, bread, and a small carton of strawberries. Clara's favorite. His 10-year-old daughter had a way of making even the grayest mornings bearable when there were strawberries involved. He'd promised her pancakes tomorrow, and Jackson Sullivan didn't break promises. Not to her, not after everything. He turned down Ashford Lane, a shortcut he'd taken 100 times. It was narrow, flanked by old brick buildings that used to house textile factories back when Hollow Creek had been something more than a stop on the way to somewhere else. Now they were just empty shells. Windows boarded up, graffiti fading under years of weather. The street lights here were sparse. The rain made it worse, turning the world into smudged charcoal. Jackson adjusted the bag on his shoulder and kept walking. His mind was already home. Clara asleep on the couch with a book on her chest. The small apartment warm and quiet. Maybe he'd have time to fold the laundry before he collapsed into bed himself. Then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Sharp, desperate. Cut off too soon. Jackson stopped. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. He turned his head, listening past the rain. For a moment, there was nothing. Just water drumming against pavement and the hum of a distant car engine. Then he heard it again. A voice. Female. Strained. "Please, I don't have anything. Just let me go." Jackson's jaw tightened. Every instinct in his body told him to move. He set the grocery bag down carefully against the wall and stepped forward. Boots silent now. Deliberate. The alley opened up to his right, a gap between two crumbling buildings. He moved toward it, pulse steady, breath controlled. What he saw made his blood go cold. A woman was on the ground, back pressed against the wet brick wall, one arm raised defensively. Two men stood over her. One held her purse, rifling through it. The other had his hand on her shoulder, shoving her down every time she tried to stand. "Stay down," the second man growled. He was stocky, mid-30s, wearing a stained hoodie. His voice was rough, impatient. "We're not done yet." The woman's face was streaked with rain and something darker. Blood. Her coat was torn at the shoulder. She wasn't screaming anymore. She looked like someone who had already calculated her odds and found them lacking. Jackson didn't think. He moved. voice cut through the rain like a blade. Both men turned. The one holding the purse straightened, eyes narrowing. The other one, the one with his hand on her, didn't let go. He just smiled, ugly, confident. "Walk away, man," the stocky one said. "This doesn't concern you." Jackson stepped into the alley. Closer now. Close enough to see the woman's eyes widen slightly. Close enough to see her lip was split, her breathing shallow. "Let her go," Jackson said. His tone was calm, flat, the kind of calm that came from somewhere deeper than anger. The man with the purse laughed. "You serious right now? There's two of us." "I know," Jackson replied. The stocky man released the woman's shoulder and stepped forward, squaring up. "You got a death wish or something?" Jackson didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders loose, hands at his sides, waiting. The taller one, the one holding the purse, tossed it aside and moved in from the other direction. They were flanking him now. Classic, predictable. "Last chance," the stocky one said, cracking his knuckles. "Turn around and pretend you didn't see anything." Jackson looked past him, looked at the woman. She was watching him with something close to disbelief. Like she couldn't understand why a stranger would step into this. He looked back at the two men, and then he did something that changed everything. He pushed up the sleeve of his jacket, slowly, deliberately, revealing his right forearm. The tattoo was impossible to miss. Even in the low light, even through the rain, it was stark, bold. A coiled serpent wrapped around a dagger with a single word beneath it in sharp, black ink. Reaper. But it wasn't the design that made the stocky man freeze. It wasn't the artistry. It was what it meant. The style. The placement. The unmistakable mark of someone who had walked through doors most people didn't come back from. The taller man saw it too. His face drained. "Oh, hell no," he muttered, stepping back. The stocky one stared at Jackson's arm, then at his face. Whatever confidence he'd had a moment ago evaporated. He took a step back, then another. "We're done here," he said quickly, voice tight. "Yeah," the other one agreed, already turning. "We're done." They didn't run, but they moved fast. Within seconds, they were gone. Footsteps echoing down the alley and fading into the rain-soaked night. Jackson stood still for a moment, letting his heartbeat settle. Then he rolled his sleeve back down and turned to the woman. She was still against the wall, staring at him like he'd just materialized out of thin air. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She blinked, tried to speak. Her voice came out hoarse. "I think so." He crouched down slowly, giving her space. "Can you stand?" She nodded, but when she tried, her legs gave out. Jackson caught her gently, one hand steadying her elbow. She flinched, then relaxed slightly when she realized he wasn't going to hurt her. "Easy," he said. "You're safe now." She looked up at him, eyes searching his face. "Who are you?" "Just someone passing by," Jackson said. He glanced at the split on her lip, the bruise forming on her cheekbone. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "No hospitals." Jackson frowned. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." But even as she said it, she swayed. He caught her again. "You're not fine," he said firmly. "And you're not staying here." She stared at him for a long moment. Then quietly, almost like a confession, she whispered, "They'll find me if I go to a hospital." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Who will?" But she didn't answer. She just closed her eyes, and for a second, Jackson thought she might pass out. Then she opened them again and said something that stopped him cold. "Please don't tell anyone you saw me." Jackson stared at the woman in front of him. Rain dripped from the edges of the building above, pooling around their feet. Her words hung in the air between them, strange and weighted. "Please don't tell anyone you saw me." He should have walked away. Should have called the police, let them handle it. But something in her voice, something raw and desperate, kept him rooted in place. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible, she said, "Lilia." "Lilia," he repeated. "I'm Jackson, and I'm not leaving you here." She looked at him, really looked, like she was trying to decide if he was real or some kind of trick her mind was playing on her. Finally, she nodded. "Okay." Jackson retrieved the grocery bag from where he'd left it, then returned to her side. He offered his arm. She took it, fingers trembling as they closed around his sleeve. Together, they walked out of the alley. The street was still empty. The rain hadn't let up. Jackson's truck was parked 2 blocks away, an old Ford that had seen better years but still ran. He guided Lilia toward it, moving slowly, matching her unsteady pace. "Where are we going?" she asked, voice thin. "My place," Jackson said. "It's not far. You can clean up, catch your breath. Then we'll figure out what to do next." She didn't argue, didn't ask questions. She just nodded and kept walking. When they reached the truck, Jackson opened the passenger door and helped her inside. She sank into the seat, head leaning back against the headrest, eyes closed. He shut the door gently, then walked around to the driver's side. The engine turned over with a low rumble. Jackson cranked the heat and pulled out onto the empty street. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. Lilia sat silently beside him, arms wrapped around herself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Thank you," she said after a long stretch of silence. Jackson glanced at her. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." Her voice cracked slightly. "You didn't have to stop. Most people wouldn't have." He didn't respond, because she was right. Most people wouldn't have. But Jackson wasn't most people. They drove through the quiet streets of Hollow Creek, past the closed diner, the shuttered library, the park where Clara liked to feed the ducks on Sundays. The town looked smaller at night, lonelier. After a few minutes, Lilia spoke again. "That tattoo, what they saw, what is it?" Jackson's hands tightened on the wheel. "Something from a long time ago. It scared them. It was supposed to." She turned her head slightly, studying his profile. "Were you? Was I what?" "What they thought you were." Jackson didn't answer right away. The question sat heavy between them. Finally, he said, "I was a lot of things. None of them matter now." Lilia looked down at her hands. "I understand that." He glanced at her. "Do you?" She nodded slowly. "More than you know." The apartment complex came into view, a modest 2-story building with peeling paint and a broken porch light. Jackson pulled into his usual spot and cut the engine. He grabbed the grocery bag from the back seat, then came around to help Lilia out. She was steadier now, but still shaken. He led her up the stairs to the 2nd floor, fishing his keys from his pocket. When he unlocked the door, warm air greeted them, along with the faint scent of lavender from the candle Clara had insisted on lighting earlier. The living room was small but tidy. A couch with a faded quilt draped over it. A coffee table stacked with books and crayons. A TV on a stand in the corner. On the wall, a framed drawing Clara had made last year. Stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Lilia stepped inside slowly, taking it all in. Jackson locked the door behind them and set the groceries on the kitchen counter. "Bathrooms down the hall," he said. first door on the left. There's a first aid kit under the sink. Take your time." She nodded and disappeared down the hallway. A moment later, he heard the door close softly. Jackson exhaled and ran a hand through his damp hair. His heart was still beating faster than it should. He moved to Clara's bedroom door and opened it quietly. She was asleep, curled under her blankets, one arm draped over the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 5. Her breathing was soft and even. He stood there for a moment, just watching her. She was safe. That was all that mattered. When he returned to the kitchen, he put the strawberries in the fridge and started a pot of coffee. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. Who was Lilia? Why was she so afraid of hospitals? And what had she meant when she said, "They'll find me"? The bathroom door opened. Lilia emerged, face cleaned, hair damp and pushed back. The blood was gone, but the bruises were more visible now. Her lip was swollen. There was a cut above her eyebrow. "Better?" Jackson asked. "A little." She crossed her arms, standing awkwardly in the middle of the living room. "I should go." "Not tonight," Jackson said firmly. "It's not safe." "I don't want to impose." "You're not." She looked at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "You don't even know me." "No," Jackson agreed. "But I know what it looks like when someone's running. And I know what it's like to feel like you don't have anywhere to go." Her expression shifted. Something in his words reached her. She bit her lip, then winced at the pain. "I can take the couch," she said quietly. Jackson shook his head. "You take my room. I'll sleep out here." "I can't." "Yes, you can." His tone left no room for argument. "You've been through enough tonight. Get some rest." For a moment, it looked like she might protest. But then her shoulders sagged, and she nodded. "Okay." He led her to his bedroom, a simple space with a neatly made bed and a dresser. He pulled out a clean t-shirt and sweatpants from a drawer and handed them to her. "These will be too big, but they're warm." Lilia took them, fingers brushing his briefly. "Thank you, Jackson." He nodded and stepped back. "If you need anything, I'm right outside." She closed the door softly. Jackson stood in the hallway for a moment, then returned to the living room. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat on the couch, staring at the rain streaking down the window. He thought about the tattoo, about the way those men had looked at it and fled. He hadn't wanted to use it, hadn't wanted to be that person again. But tonight, it had saved someone. Maybe that was enough. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. Nearly 1 in the morning. Clara would be up in 6 hours, asking about pancakes and why there was a stranger in their apartment. He'd figure out what to say when the time came. Right now, all that mattered was that Lilia was safe. And for tonight, that would have to be enough. Morning came slowly, filtered through thin curtains and the sound of rain that had never quite stopped. Jackson woke to the creak of floorboards and the familiar shuffle of small feet. He blinked, disoriented for a moment, then remembered he was on the couch. "Dad." Clara stood in the hallway entrance, wearing her dinosaur pajamas and holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. Her dark hair stuck up in 3 different directions. She was staring at him with the kind of curiosity only a 10-year-old could muster at 6 in the morning. Jackson sat up, rubbing his face. "Morning, kiddo." "Why are you on the couch?" she asked, patting closer. I gave up my bed for the night." Her eyes narrowed. "For who?" Before Jackson could answer, the bedroom door opened. Lilia stepped out, wearing his oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She froze when she saw Clara. Clara froze too. Then she looked at her dad, then back at Lilia, then back at her dad. "Dad," she said slowly, "there's a lady in our house." "I noticed," Jackson said, standing. "Clara, this is Lilia. She had a rough night and she's staying with us for a little bit. Lilia, this is my daughter, Clara." Lilia stepped forward carefully, offering a small smile despite the bruises on her face. "Hi, Clara. It's nice to meet you." Clara tilted her head, studying Lilia with the unflinching honesty that came naturally to her. "What happened to your face?" "Clara," Jackson said gently. "It's okay," Lilia said quickly. She crouched down slightly, meeting Clara's eyes. "I had an accident last night, but your dad helped me. He's very kind." Clara considered this. Then she nodded. "Yeah, he is. Are you staying for pancakes?" Lilia blinked, surprised. "I don't want to intrude." "Dad promised pancakes," Clara said matter-of-factly. "And we have strawberries. You can have some if you want." Jackson met Lilia's eyes over Clara's head. There was something softening in her expression, something that hadn't been there last night. "I'd like that," Lilia said quietly. Clara grinned. "Okay, but I get to help." Breakfast was louder than Jackson expected. Clara insisted on mixing the batter, which resulted in flour on the counter, the floor, and somehow on the ceiling. Lilia sat at the small kitchen table, watching with a faint smile as Clara narrated every step of the process like she was hosting a cooking show. "And now," Clara announced, "we add the secret ingredient." "Which is?" Lilia asked. Clara leaned in conspiratorially. "Vanilla extract, but only a little, or it tastes like perfume." Lilia laughed. It was a small sound, hesitant, but genuine. Jackson heard it from where he stood at the stove, and felt something in his chest ease. When the pancakes were ready, they sat together at the table. Clara doused hers in syrup and talked nonstop about the book she was reading, a mystery involving a talking cat and a missing necklace. Lilia listened, asking questions at all the right moments. Jackson watched them both, his coffee growing cold in his hands. After breakfast, Clara retreated to her room to draw, leaving Jackson and Lilia alone in the kitchen. He started washing dishes. Lilia stood and joined him, drying without asking. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Lilia spoke. "She's wonderful." Jackson smiled faintly. "She's my whole world." "I can tell." Lilia set a plate on the counter. "How long has it been just the two of you?" Jackson's hand stilled in the soapy water. He didn't look at her. 5 years. Her mother? Left when Clara was 5. He resumed scrubbing a pan. Said she couldn't do it anymore. The routine, the responsibility. She wanted something else, someone else. Lilia was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." Jackson shrugged. "It hurt, still does sometimes. But Clara's better off. She doesn't remember much of it, and I've made sure she doesn't have to." "You've done an incredible job," Lilia said softly. He finally looked at her. "What about you? You never told me why those men were after you, or why you're so afraid of being found." Lilia's expression closed off slightly. She set down the towel and crossed her arms. "It's complicated. Most things are." She looked toward the window, at the rain still streaking down the glass. "I'm not who you think I am." "I don't think you're anyone," Jackson said. "I just know you needed help." She smiled sadly. "That's the problem. I've spent my whole life not needing help. And now I don't even know where to start." Before Jackson could respond, his phone buzzed. He dried his hands and checked it. A text from his boss at the warehouse. "Need you for a double shift today. Equipment's still down. Can you come in at noon?" Jackson sighed. He typed back a quick reply confirming, then pocketed the phone. "I have to work," he said. "But you're welcome to stay here. Clara will be home all day. She's homeschooled, does her lessons in the afternoon." Lilia shook her head. "I can't stay. I've already taken too much from you. You haven't taken anything." "Jackson, Stay," he said firmly. "At least until you figure out what you're going to do. One more day won't hurt." She stared at him, and for the first time since last night, he saw tears welling in her eyes. She blinked them back quickly, looking away. "Okay," she whispered. "One more day." Later that morning, after Jackson had left for work, Lilia sat on the couch with Clara. The girl had spread out her drawings across the coffee table, explaining each one in elaborate detail. "This one's a dragon," Clara said, pointing. "But she's nice. She only eats flowers." Lilia smiled. "She sounds very polite." "This one's my dad," Clara continued, holding up another drawing. "He's fixing a car. He used to fix cars all the time before he started working at the warehouse." "Did he?" Lilia asked, genuinely curious. Clara nodded. "He says cars made sense to him. People are harder." Lilia looked at the drawing, at the careful way Clara had drawn her father's face. There was love in every line. "Your dad is a good man," Lilia said quietly. Clara looked up at her. "I know. That's why I don't understand why Mom left." The honesty of it cut through Lilia like glass. She reached out carefully and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Sometimes people leave because they're scared," Lilia said gently. "Not because of anything you did, or because of your dad, but because they don't know how to stay." Clara frowned. "That's a dumb reason." "Yeah," Lilia agreed. "It really is." They sat together in comfortable silence after that. Clara returned to her drawings. Lilia watched the rain and thought about all the times she'd left. All the people she'd walked away from because staying felt impossible. But here, in this small apartment with chipped paint and secondhand furniture, something felt different. For the first time in years, Lilia didn't want to run, and that terrified her more than anything. Jackson returned home just after 8 that night, exhausted and smelling faintly of machine oil. The double shift had stretched longer than expected, and his back ached from hours of repetitive lifting. All he wanted was a hot shower and maybe 5 minutes of silence before Clara inevitably asked him to read her another chapter of the mystery book. But when he opened the apartment door, something stopped him. Music, not from the TV or a radio. Live music. Piano music, soft and haunting, floating through the small space like something from another world. Jackson set his keys down quietly and followed the sound. In the corner of the living room, next to the window, sat the old keyboard he'd bought Clara 2 years ago from a thrift store. She'd been excited about it for exactly 3 weeks before losing interest. Now it mostly collected dust and doubled as a shelf for books. Lilia sat in front of it, fingers moving across the keys with a grace that didn't match the bruises still visible on her face. Her eyes were closed. Her posture was perfect. The melody she played was melancholic but beautiful, each note deliberate and full of feeling. Clara sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, chin resting on her hands, completely mesmerized. Jackson stood in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. He'd never heard anyone play like that. Not in person. It was the kind of music that made you forget where you were, that pulled you somewhere deeper. When the song ended, Clara clapped enthusiastically. "That was amazing. Can you teach me?" Lilia opened her eyes and smiled. "I can try, but I'm a little rusty." "You don't sound rusty," Clara insisted. "That's very kind of you." Jackson cleared his throat. Both of them turned. Lilia's expression shifted, becoming more guarded, like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. "Hey," Jackson said. "I didn't know you played." Lilia stood, brushing her hands on her borrowed sweatpants. "I didn't either, not until today." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She glanced at Clara, then back at him. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Jackson nodded. "Clara, why don't you get ready for bed? I'll come read to you in a bit." Clara groaned, but didn't argue. She hugged Lilia quickly, said goodnight, and disappeared down the hallway. When her bedroom door clicked shut, Jackson turned to Lilia. "What's going on?" Lilia sat back down on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. "I remembered something today. Not everything, just pieces. But enough." Jackson sat in the armchair across from her. "About last night?" "About before last night." She looked down at her hands. "I've been trying to figure out who I am, why I was in that alley, why those men were after me. And today, when I saw that keyboard, something just clicked." "The music," Jackson said. She nodded. "I used to play. A lot. Professionally, I think. My hands knew what to do before my brain did. It was like muscle memory from another life." Jackson leaned forward. "Do you remember your last name?" Lilia hesitated. "Chambers. Lilia Chambers." The name didn't mean anything to Jackson. He didn't follow business news or high society gossip. But the way she said it, the weight behind it, told him it meant something to her. "Okay," he said. "Lilia Chambers. That's a start." "It's more than a start," she said quietly. "I looked myself up on Clara's tablet this afternoon. I hope that's okay." "Of course." She took a breath. "I'm a CEO, or I was. Chambers Global Solutions, tech company, headquarters in Portland. I've been missing for 3 days." Jackson sat back, processing. "Missing. There are articles," Lilia continued. "Speculation about what happened. Some people think I was kidnapped. Others think I ran away. There's even a theory that I staged my own disappearance for publicity." She laughed bitterly. "They're not entirely wrong about the running away part." "Why did you run?" Lilia stood and walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. "Because I couldn't breathe anymore. The company, the board meetings, the investors, the press. It was suffocating. I built something from nothing, and then it became this machine that didn't need me anymore. It just needed my name, my face, my signature on documents I barely had time to read." She turned to face him. 3 nights ago, I was at a fundraiser, black tie event, 200 people. I stood on stage and gave a speech about innovation and opportunity, and the whole time I felt like I was drowning. When it was over, I walked out. Didn't tell anyone, didn't take my phone. I just left. "And you ended up here," Jackson said. "I took a bus, then another. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to disappear. I checked into a motel outside of town using cash. But someone must have recognized me. Or maybe I wasn't as careful as I thought." She looked away. "Those men last night, they weren't random muggers. They knew who I was. They knew I had money." Jackson's jaw tightened. "They targeted you?" "Yes." He stood and crossed the room to her. "Lilia, you can't just disappear like that. People are looking for you. Your company, your family." "I don't have family," she interrupted. "Not anymore. Parents died when I was 22. No siblings. The company is all I had. And the company doesn't care about me. It cares about stock prices and quarterly reports." Jackson studied her face. The exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. "So, what do you want to do?" he asked. She looked at him, surprised by the question. "What?" "You heard me. What do you want?" Lilia's eyes welled up. "I don't know. I've spent the last 15 years doing what I was supposed to do. Building, growing, succeeding. I don't know what I want anymore." "Then stay," Jackson said simply, "until you figure it out." She shook her head. "I can't. You've already done so much." "I'm not asking you to leave," he said firmly. "I'm asking you to stay. Not forever. Just until you know what comes next." "Why would you do that?" Her voice broke. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," Jackson admitted. "But I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning. And I know that sometimes the only thing that saves you is someone willing to throw you a line." Lilia stared at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. "What if I can't pay you back? What if I'm more trouble than I'm worth?" "Then we'll deal with it," Jackson said. "Together." She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Jackson stepped forward carefully and placed a hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, just slightly, like she was testing whether he was real. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They stood like that for a long moment. Then Lilia pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For last night. For today. For not asking me to be someone I'm not ready to be yet." Jackson nodded. "You're welcome." "But Lilia?" "Yeah. Eventually, you're going to have to decide. Whether you go back or move forward, you can't hide forever." She looked at him with something close to gratitude. "I know. But for now, can I just be here? With you and Clara? Just for a little while?" "As long as you need," Jackson said. And he meant it. Later that night, after Jackson had read to Clara and tucked her in, he found Lilia sitting on the couch with a cup of tea. She'd changed into one of his old flannels, sleeves rolled up, hair loose around her shoulders. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Too much in my head." He sat beside her. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." She smiled faintly. "But I do want to say something." "Okay." "You saved my life," she said. "And not just last night. Today, too. You gave me a reason to stay when every part of me wanted to run." Jackson looked at her. "You don't have to run anymore." "I hope you're right," Lilia said quietly. And for the first time in 3 days, she let herself believe it might be true. The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Lilia didn't leave. Jackson didn't ask her to. And Clara, with the easy acceptance that came naturally to her, simply folded Lilia into their lives like she'd always been there. Mornings became a shared routine. Jackson would wake early, make coffee, and find Lilia already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug, staring out the window at the rain that never seemed to fully stop. They didn't talk much in those early hours, just existed quietly in the same space, finding comfort in the silence. Clara would emerge around 7, hair messy, asking what was for breakfast. Lilia had taken over cooking duties without anyone asking her to. She made scrambled eggs with cheese, toast with jam, and oatmeal with cinnamon when they ran out of eggs. She moved around the kitchen with surprising ease, and Jackson found himself watching her more than he probably should. One morning, Clara asked if Lilia could help with her schoolwork. Jackson had been doing his best with homeschooling, but math wasn't his strong suit, and Clara knew it. "Are you good at fractions?" Clara asked, looking up at Lilia with hopeful eyes. Lilia smiled. "I used to be." Let's see if I still am. They sat together at the table, textbook open between them. Jackson watched from the kitchen as Lilia patiently explained the concept, breaking it down into pieces Clara could understand. When Clara finally got the answer right, she cheered, and Lilia laughed. It was the first real laugh Jackson had heard from her. Unguarded, genuine. It changed her whole face, softened the edges that stress and fear had carved into her features. That afternoon, while Jackson was at work, Lilia and Clara baked cookies. When he came home, the apartment smelled like sugar and vanilla, and there was flour on every surface. "We made chocolate chip," Clara announced proudly, holding up a slightly burnt cookie. "This one's yours?" Jackson took it and bit into it. It was too sweet and a little crispy around the edges, but he ate the whole thing. "Best cookie I've ever had," he said. Clara beamed. Lilia rolled her eyes, but smiled. By the end of the first week, Lilia had become part of the household. She did laundry without being asked, folded it carefully, and left it in neat stacks on Jackson's bed. She washed dishes, swept floors, and even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom using a YouTube tutorial and sheer determination. "You don't have to do all this," Jackson told her one evening. "I know," Lilia said, "but I want to. I need to feel useful." He understood that, the need to contribute, to not feel like a burden. One rainy Saturday, Clara convinced Lilia to play the keyboard again. This time, she taught Clara a simple melody, guiding her small fingers across the keys. Clara struggled at first, frustrated when she hit the wrong notes. But Lilia was patient, encouraging, never critical. "Music isn't about being perfect," Lilia said gently. "It's about expressing something you can't put into words." Clara looked up at her. "Like what? Like how you feel? Happy, sad, angry, scared. The piano doesn't judge. It just listens." Clara tried again, slower this time. When she got through the whole melody without stopping, she grinned so wide it made Jackson's chest ache. "I did it," Clara exclaimed. "You did," Lilia agreed, pride evident in her voice. Jackson stood in the doorway, watching them. There was something deeply right about the scene, something that felt like family. Later that night, after Clara had gone to bed, Jackson and Lilia sat on the couch together. She'd started wearing her own clothes again, pieces Jackson had picked up from a thrift store at her request, nothing flashy. Just jeans, sweaters, comfortable things. "She's getting attached to you," Jackson said quietly. Lilia looked at him. "Is that a problem?" "I don't know yet." She nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. "I'm getting attached too, to both of you." "That scares you," he observed. "Terrifies me," she admitted. "Because I don't know how long I can stay, and I don't want to hurt her or you." Jackson turned to face her. "Then don't." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" Lilia looked away. "Because eventually someone's going to find me, or I'm going to have to make a decision about what comes next. And when that happens, I don't know if I'll be strong enough to choose this." "Choose what?" "This," she said, gesturing around the apartment. "This life, this quiet, you and Clara. Everything I've been running from, it's still out there. The company, the obligations, the expectations. I can't hide forever." Jackson reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, intentionally, not out of necessity, but connection. Her fingers curled around his. "You're not hiding," he said. "You're healing. There's a difference." She looked at their joined hands. "What if I'm not strong enough?" You are, Jackson said firmly. You survived that alley. You survived everything that led you there. You're stronger than you think. Lilia's eyes filled with tears. How do you know? Because you're still here. You didn't run. And every day you stay, you're choosing something different. Something better. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move, just sat there, holding her hand, letting her breathe. I haven't felt safe in years, Lilia whispered. Not until now. You are safe, Jackson promised. As long as you're here, you're safe. The next day was Sunday. Clara insisted they all go to the park despite the drizzle. Jackson packed sandwiches. Lilia brought a blanket. They walked the 3 blocks to Pinehurst Park, Clara skipping ahead with her jacket hood up, jumping in every puddle she could find. They found a covered picnic table near the playground. Clara ran off to the swings while Jackson and Lilia unpacked the food. She's got so much energy, Lilia said, watching Clara pump her legs, trying to swing as high as possible. Always has, Jackson replied, even when she was little. Her mom used to say she was like a wind-up toy that never wound down. Lilia glanced at him. Do you miss her? Clara's mom? Jackson thought about it. I miss who I thought she was. But the person who left, I don't think I ever really knew her. That must have been hard. It was harder on Clara, Jackson said. She asked about her mom for the first year, then she just stopped. I think she realized her mom wasn't coming back. I'm sorry. Jackson shrugged. We're okay. We have each other. That's enough. Lilia watched Clara swing higher and higher, fearless and laughing. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Jackson said quietly. They ate sandwiches and watched Clara play. At one point, she called for Lilia to come push her on the swings. Lilia went without hesitation, and Jackson watched as the two of them laughed together, Lilia pushing higher and higher, while Clara shrieked with delight. For a moment, Jackson let himself imagine this was permanent. That Lilia would stay, that the 3 of them could build something real. But then he remembered her words from the night before. Eventually, someone's going to find me. And he knew that no matter how much he wanted this to last, the world outside this small bubble was still waiting. When they got home that evening, soaked from the rain but happy, Clara hugged Lilia goodnight and disappeared into her room. Jackson made tea. Lilia stood by the window, watching the rain. Thank you for today, she said. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She turned to him. You've given me something I didn't think I'd ever have again. What's that? Hope, she said simply. And in that moment, Jackson knew he was in trouble, because he was falling for her. And when she left, it was going to break him. The knock on the door came on a Tuesday afternoon. Jackson was at work. Clara was at the kitchen table, working through a science worksheet. Lilia was washing dishes, humming softly to herself. The knock was firm. Professional? Not the kind of knock a neighbor would make. Lilia froze, hands still submerged in soapy water. Clara looked up. Should I get it? Clara asked. No, Lilia said quickly. Stay here. She dried her hands and moved toward the door slowly. Through the peephole, she saw 2 people. A man in a dark suit and a woman with a tablet under her arm. Both looked expensive, out of place in this building. Lilia's heart hammered. She knew who they were before. They said a word. She opened the door halfway, keeping the chain lock engaged. Can I help you? She asked, voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Miss Chambers, we've been looking for you. Behind her, Clara had gone very still. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lilia said. The woman stepped forward. "Miss Chambers, I'm Victoria Grant, head of PR for Chambers Global Solutions. This is Nathan Cross, Chief Legal Counsel. We need to speak with you. It's urgent." "How did you find me?" "Credit card transaction at a thrift store downtown," Nathan said. "Small purchase, easy to miss, but we've been monitoring." Lilia's jaw tightened. "I don't want to talk to you." "We understand you've been under stress," Victoria said, her tone annoyingly gentle. "But the company needs you. The board is in chaos. Investors are panicking. Your disappearance has cost us millions in stock value alone." "Good," Lilia said flatly. Nathan's expression hardened. "Miss Chambers, you have responsibilities, contractual obligations. You can't just walk away. Watch me." She moved to close the door, but Nathan stepped forward, blocking it with his foot. "We're not leaving without you," he said. "Then you're trespassing." Lilia's voice was ice. "Get your foot out of my door or I'll call the police." "The police?" Nathan laughed. "You've been missing for over a week. They'll be very interested to hear where you've been, and with whom." Lilia's blood ran cold. They knew about Jackson, about Clara. "Leave them out of this," she said quietly. "Then come with us," Victoria said. "We have a car outside. We can have you back in Portland in 2 hours. You can release a statement, reassure the board, and we'll handle the rest." "And if I refuse?" "Then we involve the authorities," Nathan said. "File a wellness check. Have this apartment searched. I'm sure your new friends wouldn't appreciate that kind of attention." Lilia stared at them, rage and helplessness warring inside her. They had her cornered, and they knew it. "I need time," she said finally. "You don't have time," Nathan replied. "The board meets tomorrow morning. You need to be there." "I said I need time." Victoria sighed. "Fine. We'll give you until tonight, 8 o'clock. There's a car waiting at the corner of Ashford and Birch. Be there or we come back with lawyers and police." They turned and walked away. Lilia closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing. When she turned, Clara was standing in the hallway, eyes wide. "Who were those people?" Clara asked. "No one important," Lilia lied. But Clara was too smart for that. "Are you leaving?" Lilia's throat tightened. "I don't know." She pulled out her phone and called Jackson. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" "We need to talk," Lilia said. "Can you come home?" "I'm in the middle of a shift." "Please," she interrupted. "It's important." There was a pause. Then, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." When Jackson walked through the door, Lilia was sitting on the couch, arms wrapped around herself. Clara was in her room, door closed. The apartment felt heavier somehow, like the air had changed. "What happened?" Jackson asked, sitting beside her. Lilia told him everything. The knock, the people from her company, the ultimatum. When she finished, Jackson was silent for a long moment. "So they found you," he said finally. "Yes." "And they want you back?" "Yes." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," Lilia said, voice breaking. "If I go back, I lose this. You, Clara, the peace I've finally found. But if I don't, they'll make your life hell. They'll investigate you, dig into your past, turn this into something ugly." "I can handle it," Jackson said. "I can't," Lilia replied. "I can't let them hurt you because of me." Jackson turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Lilia, listen to me. I don't care what they do. I don't care what they dig up. You are not responsible for their actions." "But I am," she insisted. I brought this into your life, into Clara's life. You've been nothing but kind to me, and now you're going to pay for it. Stop, Jackson said firmly. You didn't bring trouble. You brought light. You made this place feel like home again. Don't you dare apologize for that. Tears streamed down Lilia's face. I don't want to leave. Then don't. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, Jackson interrupted. You have a choice. Go back to a life that made you miserable, or stay here and build something new. It won't be easy. They'll fight you. But you don't have to face it alone. Lilia looked at him, at the determination in his eyes, the steadiness that had drawn her to him from the beginning. What if I'm not strong enough? She whispered. You are, Jackson said. And even if you're not, I am. We both are. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. I've spent my whole life doing what was expected of me. Building a company, making money, proving I was worthy of my parents' legacy, and it nearly killed me. Then stop, Jackson said simply. Stop living for ghosts. Start living for yourself. Lilia opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. At this man who had saved her life without asking for anything in return. Who had given her shelter, safety, and something she'd never expected to find. Love. It terrified her. But it also felt like the only true thing she'd ever known. If I stay, she said slowly, they'll make it difficult. They'll sue. They'll smear my name. They'll try to force me back. Let them try, Jackson said. We'll fight them. Together. Lilia laughed through her tears. You really believe that? I know that, Jackson replied. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, and full of everything she couldn't say. When she pulled back, Jackson was smiling. Is that a yes? He asked. That's a yes, Lilia whispered. At 8 o'clock that night, the car at the corner of Ashford and Birch waited and waited. And when it finally drove away an hour later, Lilia was sitting on Jackson's couch, Clara curled beside her, playing a simple melody on the keyboard. She wasn't running anymore. She was home. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later. Jackson found the envelope wedged in the apartment door when he returned from work. Official, legal, threatening in its formality. He opened it standing in the hallway, reading the dense legal language that boiled down to one simple message. Lilia Chambers was in breach of contract, and Chambers Global Solutions intended to pursue every legal remedy available. He found Lilia in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. Clara was at the table, coloring a picture of a castle. This came today, Jackson said, holding up the papers. Lilia's knife stilled. She set it down carefully and took the documents. As she read, her face drained of color. They're suing for breach of fiduciary duty, she said quietly, claiming I abandoned my responsibilities and caused irreparable harm to the company. Can they do that? Jackson asked. They can try. Lilia set the papers on the counter. They want me to return immediately and resume my position. If I refuse, they're seeking financial damages. How much? She looked at him. $20 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Jackson exhaled slowly. That's a lot of money, Clara said from the table, having heard everything. Yes, it is, Lilia agreed, her voice strained. That night, after Clara had gone to bed, Lilia and Jackson sat on the couch in the dark. Neither had turned on any lights. The apartment felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. I'm sorry, Lilia said for the 100th time. Stop apologizing, Jackson replied. I brought this into your life. You brought yourself into my life. He interrupted. Everything else is just noise. Lilia turned to him. It's not noise, it's real. They're going to drag me through court, drag you through court. They'll investigate every part of my life here, your life. They'll paint me as unstable, irresponsible. They'll use Clara against me. Let them, Jackson said calmly. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He shifted to face her. You think this is the first time someone's tried to intimidate me? You think I haven't dealt with lawyers and threats before? Lilia blinked. What are you talking about? Jackson was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and measured. When Clara's mom left, she didn't just walk away. She tried to take Clara with her, said I was unfit, that I couldn't provide the kind of life a kid deserved. He paused. She hired lawyers, expensive ones. They dug into everything. My work history, my finances. The fact that I didn't have a college degree. Jackson, Lilia breathed. They found out about my past. Before Clara. Before I cleaned up my life. He looked at his hands. I wasn't always the person you see now. I made mistakes, bad ones, and they used every single one against me. What happened? I fought back, Jackson said simply. I couldn't afford good lawyers, so I represented myself. I showed up to every hearing. I documented everything. I proved that I was the parent who showed up, who stayed, who cared. He met her eyes, and I won. Not because I had money or power, but because I was willing to fight for what mattered. Lilia's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. I don't talk about it, Jackson said. But I'm telling you now because I need you to understand something. They can sue you. They can threaten you. They can drag this out for years. But they can't make you go back. And they can't take away what we have unless you let them. She reached for his hand. What if I lose everything? My company, my reputation, my money? Then you lose it, Jackson said. And you build something else, something better. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, he admitted. It's terrifying. But it's possible. I know because I've done it. Lilia leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her. She buried her face in his chest and let herself cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd allowed before, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere she'd kept locked away for years. Jackson held her through all of it. He didn't tell her to stop, didn't try to fix it. He just held her and let her break apart because he understood that sometimes that's what healing looked like. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and wet, but there was something clearer in her eyes. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. But I don't want to run anymore. Then don't, Jackson said. Stay, fight, build a life that's actually yours. She looked at him, at this man who had somehow become her anchor in the storm. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said. Jackson smiled softly. I know. I've been falling in love with you since you played that first song on Clara's keyboard. This is crazy, Lilia said, laughing through her tears. We barely know each other. I know you're strong, Jackson said. I know you're kind. I know you make Clara laugh and you fold laundry like it's a meditation. I know you take your coffee black and you hum when you're concentrating. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I know enough. Lilia kissed him then, properly this time. Not tentative or uncertain, but with all the feeling she'd been holding back. When they broke apart, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. We're going to get through this, he said. Promise? I promise. The next morning, Lilia called a lawyer. one of the corporate attorneys who had worked for her company, but a small-time employment lawyer Clara's teacher had recommended. His office was above a coffee shop, and he charged reasonable rates. His name was Thomas Reeves, and when Lilia explained her situation, he listened without judgment. "They're trying to bully you into coming back," Thomas said after reviewing the lawsuit. "It's a common tactic, make the fight so expensive and exhausting that you give up." "What are my chances?" Lilia asked. Thomas leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, it depends. Do you have documentation of your mental state when you left? Any evidence of the pressure you were under?" "I have emails," Lilia said. "Hundreds of them. Demands from the board, threats about performance, messages sent at 2 a.m. expecting immediate responses." "That helps," Thomas said. "We can argue constructive discharge, that the work environment became so intolerable that a reasonable person would have felt compelled to leave." "Will it work?" "It might," Thomas said. "But it won't be quick, and it won't be cheap." Lilia nodded. "I understand." When she left the office, Jackson was waiting outside with 2 coffees. He handed her one. "How'd it go?" "It's going to be a fight," Lilia said. "But I think I can win." Jackson smiled. "I know you can." They walked back to the apartment together, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Spring arrived slowly in Hollow Creek, announced not by warmth but by the absence of rain. The clouds began to break, allowing pale sunlight to filter through. Flowers pushed up through the mud in the small park. The air smelled different, like possibility. Lilia had been living with Jackson and Clara for 6 weeks. The lawsuit was ongoing, dragging through depositions and motions. But something had shifted. Lilia was no longer afraid. She was angry, and that anger had crystallized into determination. She spent her mornings working with Thomas, organizing documents and building her case. She spent her afternoons with Clara, teaching her piano and helping with schoolwork. And she spent her evenings with Jackson, cooking dinner and talking about everything and nothing. One Saturday morning, Lilia woke before dawn. She dressed quietly and slipped out of the apartment, walking the empty streets until she reached the alley where Jackson had found her. It looked different in daylight, smaller, less menacing. Just a narrow passage between buildings marked by graffiti and overflowing dumpsters. She stood there for a long time, remembering the fear, the cold, the certainty that she'd reached the end. And then she remembered Jackson's voice, the way he'd said, "You're safe now." Lilia reached into her pocket and pulled out the business card Victoria had given her weeks ago. She looked at it one last time, then tore it in half, then in half again. She let the pieces fall to the ground like snow. "I'm not that person anymore," she said aloud. When she returned to the apartment, Jackson was making coffee. He looked up when she walked in. "Where'd you go?" "To say goodbye," Lilia said. He understood without needing explanation. He poured her a cup and they sat together at the table, watching the sunrise through the kitchen window. "I want to tell you something," Lilia said. "When I left the company, I thought I was running away from failure. But I wasn't. I was running towards something I didn't know I needed." "What's that?" "A life that's mine," she said. "Not built on my parents' legacy or investors' expectations. Just mine." Jackson reached across the table and took her hand. "So what do you want to build?" Lilia smiled. "I've been thinking about that. I want to teach music, kids who can't afford lessons, kids like Clara who just need someone to show them that beauty exists even when everything else feels hard." "That's a good dream," Jackson said. "It's terrifying. Lilia admitted. I've spent my whole life in boardrooms and tech conferences. I don't know if I can do this. You taught Clara to play, Jackson pointed out. You're already doing it. Later that week, Thomas called with news. The company wants to settle, he said. Lilia sat up straighter. What are the terms? They'll drop the lawsuit if you agree to resign officially and sign an NDA. They want you to stay quiet about why you left and what happened. And if I refuse? Then we go to trial, Thomas said, which could take another year, maybe more. Lilia was silent, thinking. Finally, she said, what do you think I should do? That's not my decision, Thomas replied. But I'll tell you this. You have a strong case. I think we could win. But winning means putting your entire life on display. Every email, every meeting, every moment of breakdown. Are you prepared for that? Lilia thought about Clara, about Jackson, about the small, quiet life they'd built together in 6 weeks. A life that felt more real than anything she'd experienced in 15 years of corporate success. Set up a meeting, she said. I want to negotiate. 3 days later, Lilia walked into a conference room in downtown Portland. Nathan and Victoria were already there, along with 2 other board members she vaguely recognized. They looked surprised to see her. Miss Chambers, Nathan said stiffly. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Lilia said, sitting down. You want me to go away quietly? I want my life back. Let's talk terms. For the next 2 hours, they negotiated. Lilia was calm, focused, and utterly immovable on what mattered. She would resign. She would sign the NDA. But in exchange, she wanted 3 things. First, a severance package that would allow her to live comfortably while she figured out her next move. Second, the company would make a substantial donation to a nonprofit of her choosing, one that provided music education to underserved communities. Third, they would release a statement saying her resignation was amicable and wished her well in her future endeavors. Nathan tried to argue. Victoria tried to negotiate down, but Lilia held firm. This is what I want, she said. Take it or we go to trial. And if we go to trial, I will make sure every reporter in the country knows exactly why I left. There was a long silence. Then Nathan nodded. Fine. We'll draw up the papers. When Lilia left the building, Jackson was waiting outside in his truck. She climbed in, closed the door, and exhaled deeply. How'd it go? He asked. I won, she said simply. He smiled. I knew you would. As they drove back to Hollow Creek, Lilia watched the city fade in the rearview mirror. She didn't feel victorious exactly, just free. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't running from something or towards something. She was simply present. What are you thinking about? Jackson asked. New beginnings, Lilia said, and how sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something worth keeping. Jackson reached over and took her hand. Welcome home. And for the first time, Lilia truly felt like she was. 3 months after the settlement, Lilia stood in the middle of an empty storefront on Main Street in Hollow Creek. The space was small, dusty, and filled with the ghosts of whatever business had occupied it before. But she could see its potential. Jackson stood beside her, hands in his pockets, looking around skeptically. You're sure about this? He asked. I'm sure, Lilia said. She walked to the center of the room, her footsteps echoing. This wall comes down, opens up the space. We put mirrors here, keyboards along this side, a small waiting area with chairs and a bookshelf. We? Jackson asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Lilia turned to him. I can't do this alone. I need someone who knows construction, Someone who believes in second chances. She paused. Someone I trust completely. Jackson walked over to her. You know I work at the warehouse. You hate the warehouse, Lilia said. You told Clara last week that you'd rather wrestle a bear than do another double shift. That's true, Jackson admitted. So quit, Lilia said. Help me build this. Not just the physical space, the whole thing. We'll call it something meaningful. Teach kids who need music the way Clara needed it, the way I needed it. Jackson looked around the empty room again, and this time, he saw what she saw. Possibility, purpose, a future built on something other than survival. What would we call it? He asked. Lilia thought for a moment. Then she smiled. Second measure music, because everyone deserves a second chance to find their song. Jackson laughed. That's terrible. I know, Lilia said, grinning. But it's ours. The renovation took 2 months. Jackson quit his job at the warehouse and threw himself into the work with the kind of focus Lilia had only seen in people who'd found their calling. He tore down walls, installed new flooring, built shelves, and painted every surface a soft, welcoming cream color. Lilia handled the logistics. She ordered keyboards, organized lesson plans, reached out to local schools, and set up a scholarship fund using part of her settlement money. She wanted this place to be accessible to anyone who walked through the door, regardless of whether they could pay. Clara appointed herself official decorator. She made signs, arranged the waiting area with plants and books, and created a bulletin board where students could post drawings and notes. Above the piano in the main room, she hung a banner that read, "Your voice matters here." On opening day, Lilia stood outside the storefront with Jackson and Clara. The sun was shining. The street was quiet. A small crowd had gathered, mostly neighbors curious about the new business. Ready? Jackson asked. Lilia took a deep breath. Ready. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space they'd created was beautiful, simple but warm, filled with light and potential. Within the first week, 12 students had signed up for lessons. Within the first month, 30. Word spread quickly in the small town. Lilia was patient, encouraging, and genuinely invested in each student's progress. She didn't just teach music. She taught confidence, expression, and the belief that they had something worth sharing with the world. Jackson managed the business side, handling scheduling and finances with the same careful attention he'd once given to fixing cars and building furniture. He was good at it, better than he'd expected. And more importantly, he was happy. Clara thrived in the space too. She helped younger students, showed them how to sit properly at the keyboard, and cheered loudly whenever someone played their first complete song. She'd found her place, just like Lilia and Jackson had. One evening, after the last student had left, Lilia sat at the piano, playing softly. Jackson leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You look happy," he said. She glanced up, smiling. "I am. For the first time in years, I actually am." Jackson crossed the room and sat beside her on the bench. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Lilia's breath caught. "Jackson, let me say this," he interrupted gently. "I know we haven't known each other that long. I know your life has been chaos for months. But I also know that from the moment you walked into my life, everything got better, clearer, fuller." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small stone that caught the light. "I'm not asking you to marry me," Jackson said. "Not yet. But I'm asking you to build a life with me. Officially, completely. No more temporary arrangements or trial periods. Just us. Together." Lilia's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? You've already given me so much. You've given me more, Jackson said. You gave me hope. You gave Clara a role model. You gave us both a reason to believe that good things can happen even when everything feels broken. Lilia looked at the ring, then at Jackson, then back at the ring. Finally, she held out her hand. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Jackson slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He kissed her softly, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling. Should we tell Clara? Lilia asked. She already knows, a voice called from the doorway. They turned to find Clara standing there with a huge grin on her face, holding her phone up. I was recording the whole thing for your wedding video someday, she announced proudly. Lilia laughed, wiping her tears. Come here, you. Clara ran over and threw her arms around both of them. The three of them sat there on the piano bench, wrapped in each other, surrounded by the music school they'd built together. We're a family now, right? Clara asked. Lilia looked at Jackson, then at Clara. We've been a family for a while. This just makes it official. Outside, the sun was setting over Hollow Creek. Inside Second Measure Music, three people who had all been lost in different ways had finally found their way home. Not through grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but through kindness, patience, and the quiet courage to choose love when fear would have been easier. And that, Lilia thought, was the greatest success of all. 2 years later, on a warm Saturday afternoon in June, Second Measure Music was filled with the sound of children playing piano, their parents chatting in the waiting area, and Clara directing traffic like she'd been born to do it. Lilia stood at the front desk, scheduling lessons and answering phone calls. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a casual ponytail. She wore jeans and a comfortable sweater, no designer clothes or expensive jewelry. She looked exactly like what she was, a music teacher who loved her work. Jackson was in the back room, repairing a keyboard that had seen better days. He'd become the unofficial fix-it man for everything in the school, and he was good at it. More importantly, he was happy doing it. When the last student left for the day, Lilia locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Clara was already at the main piano, playing a piece she'd been working on for weeks. It was complex, challenging, and she played it beautifully. When she finished, both Lilia and Jackson applauded. That was perfect, Lilia said, pride evident in her voice. Clara beamed. I've been practicing every day like you taught me. It shows, Jackson added, walking over to ruffle her hair. Clara swatted his hand away, but was smiling. At 12 now, she'd grown taller, more confident, and impossibly wise for her age. She looked between Lilia and her father with the expression of someone who knew something they didn't. What? Jackson asked, noticing the look. Nothing, Clara said innocently. Just thinking about how different things are now. Different how? Lilia asked, sitting on the piano bench beside her. Clara thought for a moment. 2 years ago, we were just Dad and me. We were okay, but there was this empty space. Like something was missing, but we didn't know what it was. She looked at Lilia. And then you showed up, and everything got fuller. Lilia's eyes misted. That's a beautiful way to put it. Do you remember when you first came to our apartment? Clara asked. You were so scared. You didn't want to stay. You kept saying you'd leave as soon as you figured things out. I remember, Lilia said softly. What made you stay? Clara asked. Lilia glanced at Jackson, who was listening quietly. Then she looked back at Clara. I stayed because for the first time in my life, someone saw me as a person, not a position. Your dad didn't care about my money or my company or my reputation. He just cared that I was safe, that I was healing. She paused. And you showed me what it meant to be part of a family again. Clara hugged her tightly. I'm glad you stayed. Me too, Lilia whispered. That evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Lilia and Jackson sat on the small balcony of their apartment. They'd moved to a slightly bigger place 6 months ago, one with room for all three of them, and a view of the street below where Second Measure music stood proudly. I have something for you, Jackson said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. Lilia took it, curious. Inside was a single piece of paper. When she unfolded it, she saw it was a deed to the storefront, in both their names. Jackson, she breathed. I know we've been renting, he said, but I wanted us to own it, together, not just the business, the building, the dream, all of it. Lilia looked at him, overwhelmed. This is too much. It's exactly enough, Jackson said. You gave me and Clara a future we never thought we'd have. Let me give you something permanent in return. She set the deed down and took his face in her hands. You already gave me everything that matters. They kissed. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet of the town they'd made their home, everything felt perfectly aligned. Do you ever regret it? Jackson asked when they pulled apart. Leaving your old life? Lilia looked out at the street below, at the music school they'd built, at the life they'd created together. Not for a second, she said. I spent years building an empire that meant nothing. Now I'm building something that matters. This matters. Yeah, Jackson agreed, pulling her close. It really does. Inside the apartment, Clara had fallen asleep with a book on her chest. On the wall above her bed hung a drawing she'd made years ago. 3 stick figures holding hands under the words, "We're not lost anymore." And they weren't. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from finding yourself. It comes from being found by people who see you, hold you, and remind you that you were never truly lost at all, just waiting for the right moment to come home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.